We are carrying on our series, Standing in the Rubble, looking at how we navigate this landscape that we're in. And we're taking the month of August to look at spiritual disciplines and spiritual formation and how that may look differently as we move forward, as we learn to dig our own wells. And this morning, we're looking at fasting and frugality, or simplicity, just didn't start with an F. So we're looking at fasting and frugality, and I'm joined by the fabulous Julie Hogman. So welcome, Julie. Great to have you with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey with fasting and simplicity?
Well, I would start probably the other way around. I'll probably start with the simplicity side
Great.
of things, because the fasting sort of come out of that. I think with the simplicity, really for me, how it started was looking at the culture that we're living in at the moment and just thinking, I've had enough. I've had enough of the rush, the sense of more, the hurry, that sort of hamster wheel of the culture that we live in. And I thought, well, how does that work with my faith? How can I live in a way that actually honours God? What does simplicity look like in that picture?
How long ago would you say that? Was that a question you started asking around the time you retired, or was it before then? Were you frustrated before that point? Where would that go back to?
I would say it probably began about 2002.
Right.
Right back then, but it was very early, almost like whispers, really.
Yeah.
And then it got built on from then onwards. I think initially it started simply with simplicity and the outworkings of simplicity, and then it became, why am I doing this? And then I started asking more of the inner questions.
So, when you talk about simplicity, can you describe that? What is that? What do you mean by that?
For me, I think it is looking at the way that you want to live your life well, but also look at the things that get in the way of that cause the things that you want to do to almost like cover you. The stuff that sort of comes over you so that you cannot navigate what you want to do really well. So to sort of try and put it simply, I suppose the things that would prevent me being the woman I want to be, what are those things that get in the way?
Can you give me some examples of the things that maybe were those, what were the things, those challenges for you, or the things you wanted to simplify for you?
For me, it started really with looking at what the Bible said about my relationship with God. So I looked at the verses that talk about loving God with all your heart, your soul, your mind and your strength, and then looking as well at what it looked like to love your neighbour as yourself. And I thought, in the way that I am living my life, with everything that happens in my life, am I doing that well? And if the answer is not doing great, then what needs to go in order for me to be completely focused on what is important in my spiritual walk? Yeah,
okay. So really a simplicity of that, when Jesus says, look, these are the two things, love God, love others. That's simplicity, I guess, in an essence. And then, so then you're going, okay, well, where am I doing that? And what are the things that are stopping me doing that? What are the priorities that are snuffing that out, as it were?
Yeah.
Okay, so then how did that look? Because obviously 2002, you're married to a GP, you're mother of 3 boys, your life's busy, you're working yourself. I can't remember whether you were full-time or part-time at that point, but life's busy.
Yeah.
It's not easy to go, well, simplicity. I don't need my boys anymore, so you can't do that, right? Like, life is still busy. So
yeah. I think I had to decide what was the difference between being busy and what was the difference between being hurried.
Right.
And those two were very different things, because we live in a culture where we are busy and we have responsibilities. We have families to raise, we have work to do, we have homes to run, that sort of thing. And there is nothing wrong with being busy at all.
Right.
You know, we have responsibilities. So the first thing I wanted to make sure was that I wasn't doing some horrendous guilt trip, or even sounding like I was giving a guilt trip, there goes the fly, giving the guilt trip to anybody else, because that isn't helpful at all. So then I thought, well, if it isn't being busy, then what does hurried look like? And for me, hurried looked like you have no time to stop and think. You're going from one thing to the next without even taking in what you're doing. And you're not sort of, people talk about living in the moment, but there is no sense of peace and calm within you.
Right.
And really, everything that comes out with simplicity has to start from what is going on inside to begin with. So,
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So you started with those sort of whisperings and murmurings and thoughts and whatever in 2002. So then how's your journey progressed over the last 18 years and where have you got to with that journey?
You know, once it sort of starts within you, you start questioning every aspect of your life. Not in a really negative way, but you begin to think, well, why do I need all these clothes? And then it goes to, well, who made my clothes anyway? And so simplicity becomes a justice issue in that area.
Right.
And the same with food. It's, you know, who's growing my food? How much food do we need? Where's it coming from? And again, do we eat in season or don't we eat in season? How do we, again, justice issues, who's growing my food abroad? What does, you know, slave labour look like? And it all suddenly, everything that's gone on inside with God's heart, the outworkings of that begin to work out in the whole area of simplicity. So those are two examples. There's also the concept of simplicity of time, and for some people, you know, for some of us, we can get our diaries so filled that actually we don't have time to think. You know, I'm reminded of that poem that says, you know, if your life's so full of care and have no time to stand and stare, and I think if we don't give ourselves time or those moments where actually as we're going through our busyness, we still inside are able to really enjoy the nature that we're walking out in, or the person that we're talking to, or the child that we're trying to raise, then that was important. So again, simplicity of time. Who do I want to spend my time with? Who could I be spending my time with? And again, that comes into compassion. So it's all from the heart of God, really.
So then, because I just heard you talking there about, you know, it's not necessarily not being busy, but when you're spending time with that person or with your child or doing that in your job or whatever it might be, it's about enjoying those moments or seeing the beauty in them, or seeing the depth in them, or seeing the significance in them, or whatever that might be. So then it's simplicity. It's not necessarily just about doing less, or what it sounds like you're saying is it's actually about perspective, attitude, focus on that, or where you're living those moments from. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. And it's not necessarily either particularly having moments where you're enjoying them, but in those moments that are tough, you know, you're automatically thinking, you know, God, how can I be praying for this person, or what's the next right thing to do in this situation with that person? You almost have a clarity, more of a clarity of thought, because your life has become less hurried. So there seems to be more time to process somehow.
Because there's a centeredness in Jesus about it. So, okay, so then fasting. Where did that come from? That's a more recent journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, many years ago, we're probably in the 1990s. My children were quite small. I remember beginning to explore fasting. And as a church, I think we were doing much more of that sort of teaching and learning about it. And I did explore it for a while and then completely went off the burner. But certainly at the beginning of this year, I just felt a real sense that I needed to look at it again, and that for whatever it looks like for us as a church or as a nation, there was something about fasting that was important, and I didn't know what it was. So I thought, well, I'm going to start dipping my toe in the water again. And
so that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a responsiveness to the Spirit there, because I think sometimes, and again, this is like maybe our Western mindset, maybe our humanity, I'm not sure. It's like, well, I want to know why I'm doing something. I want to understand the reason and what am I going to get out of this? What are the outcomes? What if I put this in? What's going to be what I'm going to get from it? And actually what you're saying there is, you just had this sense from God that fasting was significant somehow. And you didn't know what, you didn't know why, you didn't know where it was headed, but you demonstrated enough faith, enough obedience to go, okay, well, if this is important, let's start looking at it. So then what did you do?
So, as I said, it's early days. I've only really been starting doing it since lockdown.
Right.
And that was just the way it worked out. It wasn't deliberate. So I thought, again, I can only speak for myself. I thought if I actually allocated a particular day, then I knew that was the day that I would be particularly focused on God, because it wasn't just about, I know fasting can take different forms, but at this moment in time, my concentration was, okay, what does fasting from food look like? And so I thought I wasn't just going to have a day where I just didn't eat. This had to be a day where I could focus on more on what God's heart was. And I also knew that for me, it would work if I compartmentalised the day. So I would perhaps spend some time reading, some time walking, some time praying, and doing it that as an experiment, sometime writing, maybe listening to somebody, learning to rest in God. So those have been my experiments really at the moment, and I'm not doing great at it, but I've started, and that's the main thing. We're starting it, we're exploring, and God is teaching me a lot. So, yeah.
Okay, so I love that, because God is teaching you, and you're finding that you are, it is forming you in some way. It is either deepening your relationship with God, or challenging some of your ideas or understandings of yourself. Where would you say?
Start with the ego, I think, is where we
Yeah.
Suddenly you realise that there's a lot of things in you that is all about you, and how you want people to see you and think. And so we're doing that little journey at the moment.
Wow.
But also it's incredible how many other things come to the fore that you could be doing to distract you. And I think for me, with fasting and again with simplicity, the two things, the whole sense of a culture that we live in that is full of distractions. It's so easy to just pick up your phone, or there's just loads of things out there that could distract you, and I'm learning what it means to be focused and serious about how I live my life.
Wow.
Not in a sober way, but actually let's be focused, because if I'm gonna live my life well for Him, then I don't want to waste things that actually I could be learning. And I know, going back to the fasting again, for some people, a day this isn't going to work for them at all. And maybe they might fast from food, or maybe they'll just spend a few minutes praying in that day. And I think you start with where you're at, really. You don't think, I can't do a whole day, therefore there's no way I'm even going to begin. It could be just one meal, right, and use that meal as a time to just be quiet before God, go out for a walk with Him. I don't know, we could be totally creative, and I think we've been so, we've boxed ourselves into what it should look like, and actually it can, the whole thing is that you spend time learning to listen to God's voice, and walking in his ways, and fasting is just one way you can do that. It seems important somehow.
I love it, Julie, because very often I think a lot of these conversations we talk to people who maybe have been practicing this discipline for years, and we kind of go, oh my goodness, how have you done that, and how have you formed that in you? And sometimes it can feel quite inaccessible maybe for us, and we're trying to go, oh well, how would you start? And actually, but it's great to hear you talking as someone who actually has just recently started and going, this is how I'm doing it. And I guess you just gave it a go, right? I mean, you just got started. You just went, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So then that's accessible for all of us. I think the simplicity thing is a longer journey, and I think you've got a lot to
It's a huge subject.
teach us on that. And I just wonder whether, if there are people who are watching this who would love to know more about that, maybe they can get in touch with you, have a conversation, chat a little bit about whether that's around food, shopping, or clothes, or whatever it might be, all the different aspects of simplicity. I know there's a lot more than that. So, thank you so much for your wisdom and your willingness to bring your sharing of a story, of a journey that you're quite new into. I really appreciate, as ever, your wisdom and your depth on these things. So thank you so much.
Thank you.